What, you want more? 3D Sonic. Oh man, it's that the fan base isn't gonna go ballistic with this topic alone. But yeah, topic in question here for today is the 3D Sonic games. A set of games that honestly, whether you like to admit it to or not, are truly games that in the Sonic franchise itself have the most outlandish reasons for either being the greatest era for Sonic or the worst of the worst, period. Yeah, I'm looking at you both, Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Forces. From the start of his 3D run with Sonic Adventure to now Sonic Frontiers, there is definitely something about 3D Sonic games that makes the franchise stand out and have memorable experiences. Emphasis on memorable there. Though nowadays, 3D Sonic games have become such a contentious thing on the video game world that even making a video about how bad the current 3D games are or how good Sonic Heroes actually is can easily send you a spot in Twitter hell because again, you made an opinion about a blue furball that simply runs fast. Which is why I don't care, because today I'm going to be discussing the many problems that 3D Sonic has, which is just code for yes, I'm indeed signing a death warrant here. Now, keep in mind that this is more of a general sense and I won't be necessarily covering each game individually, but if you want that, I'll do that for a separate time. This is all a note of the general context of 3D Sonic games, and no, this isn't one of those videos of like, oh, he's gonna talk about the problem of 3D Sonic. Watch him discuss that Sonic has had a rough transition to 3D, which actually, that's not even one of the biggest issues Sonic has had. To start with that phrase, Sonic has had a rough transition to 3D. The whole idea of Sonic having bad 3D titles was something I wasn't fully on board with since I first heard about this term back in 2018. While understandably seeing that 3D Sonic games have their divergent paths and exploring different mechanics and gameplay styles in each separate entry, as well as some level of god-awful jank, in all honesty, they did transition the 3D gameplay style in a very reasonable manner, all thanks to the efforts of 1998's Sonic Adventure on the Sega Dreamcast, baby, despite of course being the second 3D Sonic game, with Sonic 3D Blast on the Sega Saturn preceding it. Still, Sonic Adventure was a great step forward for Sonic to jump into the 3D atmosphere, no matter what you have to say about this game almost 25 years later. The game managed to keep things consistent with a classic style gameplay design and reworking it to fit that 3D mold, resulting in a game where Sonic and his ragtag group of friends felt interesting to play even if you don't like the fishing mechanics with Big the Cat. Level design was solid enough with stages like Red Mountain, Speed Highway, Emerald Coast, and even Wind Valley, and because of it, Sonic Adventure marked the foundation for future 3D titles to take some inspiration into, as we've seen with Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Heroes, and even Shadow the Hedgehog in the early 2000s. Yeah, I had to point the odd man out even if bro thinks he is on the team. By 2008 onwards, we even saw the proper evolution to the franchise with the help of the boost formula via Sonic Unleashed, a game that, while mixed reception at the time, truly stands to the test of it with its incredible gameplay design, ensuring that 3D Sonic was in a very good spot for 3D platformers all around with its fast-paced reactionary action. Of course, circa the 2010s, the 3D Sonic games were at a very creative phase to say the least, with its wacky gimmicks like the Wisps and Sonic Colors in Lost World, and again Sonic Force's entire existence, but as a whole, 3D Sonic games were still in a very good shape of sorts. Hell, Sonic Frontiers even demonstrated that 3D Sonic was back with the implementation of an open world, an open zone, and how the cyberspace levels, while completely janky at times, would give the high-speed action while roaming around the overworld all the same. Also, they brought back Supersonic's badassery, and I cannot complain at all on that. But of course, the good also comes with the bad, and while a lot of these Sonic games are typically considered solid 7 or 8 out of 10s, we can't deny the problems that these games do have at the end of the day. Which is what the whole purpose of this video is about after all. If there's one thing to start with the problems of 3D Sonic games, the voice direction and storylines would definitely be one of them, though this is mostly directed towards the 2010s with Sonic, also known as the Meta Era. The Meta Era, while fun in gameplay such as Colors being a somewhat return to Sonic's modern roots from Unleashed, Generations being a step forward with the mechanics and reintroduction to classic Sonic, and Lost World with the parkour elements that I kinda wish Sonic Team can bring it back someday, the writing wasn't something that resonated with fans back then, and even now as the glass has become tainted. Sonic's characterization in these games weren't off, but it was an odd combination of sarcasm, goofy, and just straight idiotic at times that kinda hindered a lot of people's enjoyment of the character for some time, as as they hope the return of the Jason Griffith style or even Ryan Drummond portrayal of the Blue Blur of Speed. Of course, now that we see that with Frontiers and the elevation of Sonic going from a meta commentator on copyright law to now the Sonic we've known and loved since the adventure games. But that alone starts to dig the hole a little deeper, as the story for these games, while a minor problem and inconvenience, certainly made things feel a bit inconsistent, and inconsistency is the big key word in terms of the problems that 3D Sonic has regarding its game catalog. From Adventure to Frontiers and possibly future 3D Sonic titles moving forward, Sonic the 3D platformer is the type of franchise that often experimented heavily with gameplay design, stage layout, mechanics, and gimmicks in particular. I mean, you could take a good look at this with Sonic Adventure 1 and 2's character storylines and gameplay with the upgrade gimmick, Heroes with a team-up mechanic of flight and power, Shadow the Hedgehog with literal guns at your disposal, and the boost formula with Sonic Unleashed, Colors, Generation, and Forces, and you'll see that 3D Sonic doesn't really have a stable footing in terms of a consistent gameplay design, resulting in experimentation that either works wonders or it doesn't go all the way in the main entry and becomes a laughingstock for a good number of years. And counting. In fact, this even sparked some strong debate as to whether or not certain 3D Sonic games would even be considered mainline titles, with Sonic Lost World being the main example due to its heavy divergence of gameplay and stage design. That alone speaks volumes to Sonic Team's lack of a proper formula and keeping things consistent while also evolving in the process, something that we have seen with a classic run of Sonic games with the original Sonic Trilogy and Sonic Mania. And as an example for those who don't understand what I mean here, if you take a good look at how 3D Zelda and 3D Mario games have evolved throughout the years, you see that even they have kept the formula of dungeon crawling and platforming consistent while adding onto new mechanics that makes them stand out, such as the Wolfling gimmick or the Ocarina gimmick in Twilight Princess, Majora Mask, and Ocarina of Time, to even the anti-gravity features in the Mario Galaxy games. To even make the dreaded comparison with Spark the Electric Jester, which does sound a little bit hypocritical in my end considering that I did make a video about comparing Spark to Peck a Leg Down on Sonic and vice versa, it does make sense for some people in the community to simply ask for more larger and dynamic stage designs that results in both high speeds but also exploration in the process. Spark 3 shows that it can be possible for this to happen, and the same can be said with many fan games out there as well. All Sonic needs for its 3D adventures was really to have been an evolution from the adventure games and keep some of the things they've learned there, such as an open hub world, larger stage designs built for speed and exploration for multiple routes, more characterization with the other characters, a larger storyline that can involve recurring themes and concepts like the Chaos Emeralds and Tikal, even side quests that can be done in speed trials from stages to add some replayability. The point stressed here is that Sonic's rough transition to 3D isn't necessarily because of the fact that Sonic moved into the 3D realm, but it's because of Sonic Team's lack of a consistent formula and improve upon these things for a good number of years, even if that was the case of Unleashed, Colors, Generations, and Forces, but we all know how that one turned out. Secondly, the gimmicks and formulas introduced for the 3D Sonic games are something that makes or breaks the experience for many people out there. I mean, make a poll on Twitter or even on YouTube and you'll see that sometimes things can get heavily heated about the best and the worst gimmick or mechanic in a Sonic game of all things. Now don't get me wrong here, the gimmicks and mechanics aren't the major problem for 3D Sonic, it's really the utilization of them that gets some people on their nerves, especially when it's being overused with zero explanation as to why, and yeah, I'm definitely talking about the wisps here. Since the adventure era, there was always something different that Sonic and the gang tried out, and while different is good, different can also be inconsistent, which we already discussed, resulting in mixed bag results that could have been heavy hitters if done properly. Like the early 3D Sonic games were presented with such large stage designs that would have opted for different mechanics to be in place, but the gimmicks and mechanics of each game made the experiences feel off. As much as I consider Sonic Heroes to be a good game, the jank is everywhere in that game with its team-up gimmick and lack of proper adjustments with its stage layout and mechanics for each character. The parkour like speed elements in Lost World is also a good example as to simply have the ability for Sonic to run and use the momentum, yeah I know I said the bad Sonic word again, would have greatly allowed for better stage design and exploration in future Sonic games like Sonic Forces and Frontiers, especially with that open zone idea. Plus, can you even just imagine with the layout of Sonic Frontiers and the Starfall Islands and Sonic having the best of both worlds with Lost World's ability to keep the speed forward plus the boost formula already implemented a couple of games back? That alone sounds like a great time, but I don't think Sonic Team wasn't as ambitious to try that out, which again, going back to the whole Spark the Electric Jester comparison, yeah, you kinda get the idea here. And while yeah, there was the upgrade system from the adventure games, as they did stick around for a good few titles being implemented in Sonic 06, Unleashed, and Generations to some capacity, as well as Sonic Frontiers with a skill tree, but even that wasn't much of the same, to be honest. The upgrade system simply felt scattered and wasn't executed properly in certain cases and downright failed in others. Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 did the idea justice, but by Sonic 06, things were just a little too flat. Lastly, in terms of 3D Sonic games, we can't forget about the boost formula era, where with a press of a button, Sonic can now run at tremendous speeds, opting for linear but more reactionary level design at your disposal. Though introduced in Sonic Rush on the Nintendo DS, it was mainly perfected in Sonic Unleashed and Generations, giving us a unique perspective on the speed that Sonic can achieve. But even that had its own fair share of problems. Most of the level design was built to keep things in one straight line, losing out on exploration and some different pathways that, while there could still be there, it requires a lot more of a knee-jerk reaction, especially if you're trying to get a Sun Medal in Sonic Unleashed. God, we all know how that turned out. And we also can't forget the whole boost to win hot take with Sonic Forces and how oversimplified the game's stage design and layout was like for even this to be the case. Man, this game is never gonna live down the trashes that gathered throughout its 7-year run, won't it? The thing with the gimmicks and mechanics of 3D Sonic games is that they are kind of the main reason 3D Sonic games are inconsistent, which results in sometimes, if not most of the time, poor or lack of ambition on Sonic Team's part to implement these things properly, which again circles back to the whole concept of this video in the first place, and you, the Sonic community, potentially getting heated by what I've been saying so far. But of course, there's one more problem that I would like to address with the 3D Sonic games, and this problem is one that I don't think a lot of people would find it as a problem to begin with, but is the idea that 3D Sonic games lack sort of an artistic identity, or there's no new art style evolution that would paint modern Sonic in a more fresh, creative, and modern feel. Now, I know with this take here, I did a 10-minute video about how Sonic needing a new art style, but that was more about having the various Sonic artists that work with Sonic Team to be more involved in game projects, but here I am addressing the need for Sonic to kind of embrace more of its original roots. In fact, while many hated Lost World for its art direction, I personally enjoyed the attempt of at least bringing the classic elements into a modern context, and Lost World, as well as how Generations pulled the modern stages, did that effortlessly. Of course, since then, it became reused to hell and back, but that's a topic for another day, honestly. Let's not taint this video with too many hot takes about a blue hedgehog that just goes fast. What I mean by this lack of artistic identity is that when you compare Sonic to other franchises that have been around for a good number of years, such as Mario, Crash, Kirby, and Zelda, the art direction have always shifted to provide new experiences, but still keep a consistency in the gameplay it presented. It brought a new flair, essentially, that still played the themes and ideas for the games to flourish without so much of a compromise, and 3D Sonic games are quite missing that creative flair. I mean, sure, modern Sonic has shifted in various art styles in the past when you look at the models of Sonic Heroes to Unleash and even Sonic 06 with the adventure models. The rest of the games don't have something more to offer aesthetically, so to speak, which is why currently Sonic Unleashed stands out from the others because of their ability to provide a cartoon aesthetic for modern Sonic, yet retaining the qualities of the realism behind who modern Sonic is, which was a major critique with Sonic Frontiers of how too real the set pieces were like. If you asked me, this part of the problems with 3D Sonic games is that they try to lean in too much with realism in some games and not too much in the wacky Saturday morning cartoon without using both and present a much better art direction that is well balanced. And if you think that can't be achieved in a 3D setting, then you probably skipped out on the Sonic Advance trilogy and the Sonic Rush games on the handheld, as well as Sonic Heroes. This to me is just one of Sonic's bigger problems in the 3D games, and hopefully with the help of their talented artists, we get to see a new art direction that can get those results done, be it for a 2D modern Sonic game or even another Sonic Frontiers, maybe even for that fabled Sonic Adventure 3. After all, that is bound to happen at some point, considering that Iizuka is still interested in bringing those games back on the spotlight, but hey, time can only certainly tell with that one, that's for sure. And hey, as a Sonic fan here too, I think it's important to address these problems at the end of the day, and if you think these are the problems of 3D Sonic games, or if you think there are completely different problems that I didn't quite address and you want me to do a two-parter on this, feel free to comment down below, and if you want to throw in suggestions, feel free to suggest some games or even some topics of what I should cover next in terms of like their problems too. After all, this is a new series, I'm still starting out with the channel and things like that, and I would love to see your input in the comments down below. But also keep in mind that it should be respectful as well, because especially in the context of Sonic, I've seen your Sonic takes on Twitter as is, and honestly, they're pretty feisty to say the least.